Welcome to this second webinar, co-organized with the international, with IFCU and with Altissia. We are very pleased to welcome you today for this webinar entitled Building a Blended Foreign Language Course. Today I will share the floor with Dr. Véronique Scheirs, who is working for Altissia, but also a pedagogical expert at Altissia, but also lecturer at the Catholic University of Leuven, which is a founder member of the Federation, and also Mr. Giovanni, EMEA Sales Director at Altissia. So for this second webinar, we will discuss and exchange on the importance of curriculum and courses design in blended learning in order to combine the online and face-to-face modality in the best possible way for our course to run smoothly and engage our learners, our students. So during this next 45 minutes, 60 minutes, we will address the following question and issue. What are the different models blended learning has to offer? Or should a blended course be structured and built? And how long should the learning session be? But also, how can we adapt a new system while guaranteeing pedagogical quality? So, Véronique and Giovanni will try to respond to this different question through interactive presentation. And after, we will dedicate a moment for comments regarding the topic and the elements that we have shared with you, and also to take some time to respond to your question. So we are very pleased to welcome you again today. And Véronique and Giovanni, I let you the floor and share with us the approach of Altissia on this question and your expertise.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas. And thank you for organizing this event. Good morning or good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for being here. As Nicolas said, my name is Giovanni, and I'm in charge of I'm the sales director for Altissia for the EMEA market. And as we said, together with my colleague Véronique, this morning we will present to you how Altissia can support you in within the blended learning for languages. If we can go to the next slide, please. Before giving the word to Véronique, who is going to really guide this presentation, I just wanted to give you some introduction about Altissia and who Altissia is. Altissia is a company that was established in 2005 as a spin-off from the Catholic University of Leuven. And since then, we have developed tools, a platform for e-learning languages. Right now, at this stage today, we offer variable solutions. We have a platform that is available in 36 languages as languages of interface. For learning languages, we provide a platform for learning 25 languages, and we provide an assessment test for assessing the level and the knowledge in 29 languages. As you can see, we have presence in 14 countries around the globe. Like, we basically cover all continents except Australia and Oceania, and Australia. We work with more than 600 institutions and organizations around the world in the B2E and in the B2B environment. As I said, we were born as a spin-off of the Catholic University of Leuven, so our background comes from the academic world, and we are very proud about that. So right now, as I said, I will leave the floor to Véronique to really dive deep in the topic of this morning. But I would invite you to hold your question at the end of the presentation, when we can go through all your questions, doubts, requests, and we will try to answer all of them. So thank you very much, and Véronique, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you also, Nicolas, for this introduction. Actually, don't have to say anything else now. So Nicolas already summarized the content I'll be talking about. Maybe first of all, good morning and good afternoon to depending on where you are in the world. So yeah, as Nicolas was saying, we'll be talking about really getting started, setting up a blended course in foreign language learning. We'll see mainly that there is a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of variability. I see people saying hello here, good morning, hello from Georgia. I'm situated in Belgium right now, so I hope you're all having a good day. So we'll be talking about first the different models, just to get acquainted a bit with blended learning, setting the basics together. What are we talking about, and then how can we structure it? How long could the sessions be? And we'll also be talking about teacher workload. We know that some of us, when we're teaching, we don't like always, like, we don't necessarily like change, or it's kind of a it can be a bit more difficult to get used to something new. So also talking about the teacher workload and how to make it a bit easier, maybe, and how to get this transition done. Let me start by, first of all, defining blended learning. It's one of these terms. We did it in the first webinar already as well. But maybe some of you haven't attended or are new to this webinar series. So just to put things, get us all on the same starting ground to define blended learning. So blended learning is a teaching method or a learning method where we will be combining two modalities. We have one synchronous one, real-time teacher-led learning or teaching, either in a physical classroom. It can also be in a video conferencing, a virtual classroom, depending on the modalities our institution has chosen, or maybe you have multiple campuses and you need to adapt to this kind of situation. Then video conferencing is an absolutely perfect option as well. So we're combining this synchronous modality with an asynchronous modality, where, of course, the teacher trainer will not be standing next to the learners, or is not physically present to a system. It's mostly done on a platform, for example, such as Altissia. It can also be any kind of other learning management system, and LMS, for example, Moodle or Blackboard, whatever you're using. I'm trying to be quite agnostic here, so we'll be open to all kinds of realities and teaching realities, because depending on where we are, there might be, and also the choices our institutions make, we might have one or the other option, but not necessarily all of them either. So this is quite agnostic here today on the platform basis. So of course, blended learning with our two modalities offers a lot of flexibility, because we can adapt to a lot of situations, because we are, just as we are all situated in different places, different countries in the world, we all have the different teaching realities. We have a different starting point for learners. We all want them to progress in foreign languages. It might be part of our internationalization strategy. We want to increase student mobility. We want to make them ready for potential workplace or research, and all these factors, of course, multilingualism, foreign languages play an important part. But we all have different starting points. So it can be geographic differences, but also sociocultural differences. Maybe your country is already multilingual, and for example, learning English might be somewhere on the bottom of the list, or it is an English-speaking country, and maybe other foreign languages are also part of the program. So that is really a lot of difference. Then, of course, the next difference is, who are our learners? Well, here we're all among universities, so it's more usually young adults, but they might have a different background. Some of our learners might be coming from quite a privileged international background. Others might not, and might not be that familiar with foreign languages, learning methodology. And also, we'll start talking about blended learning, so maybe also technology, internet literacy, technological literacy is also a point we need to address in these kind of elements. And of course, the language level in our learners can vary quite a lot, especially when they're starting out at university. We might have people who've been learning a language for years before, all through their school years, but others might be complete beginners as well. So we might have quite heterogeneous classes. Then, of course, there is the question of the institution, as I was mentioning earlier, depending on the choices or the possibilities the institution has, depending on the country, the background as well, there might be more or less financial means. So there might be a lot of budget for tools for an LMS, a Moodle, or any kind of virtual tools, platforms. There might be a lot of teachers, or there might be, due to budget cuttings, for example, a lack of teachers. So there's a lot of realities. And then, of course, there's a pedagogical reality as well for teachers. Do you have, as a language teacher, do you have the freedom to organize your own content, to really choose what you want? Or are your tools centralized? Do you have any kind of base rules you need to follow as well? So these might all be elements we take into consideration when we're starting out, which means that however we're setting out and where we're going, even if we had the same tools, every blended course would be slightly different depending on the teacher or the trainer teaching it. Then when we're setting out, obviously, we're talking also about the concrete course, the course itself. So what is the structure? How many credits do we have? How many numbers of hours? What's the approach? Is it more of a receptive course? Is it a productive course? Is it a general course? Is it, for example, for academic purposes? Or is it are we talking to medical students? Are we talking to law students? Is it more for specific purposes? Then, of course, the materials, be it either books or in digital. And then also, is it an existing course we've done before, or are we starting from scratch? Because if we already have some resources, we might not want to part with those. We like them, and maybe we want to just take them over and that start everything from scratch, which would also increase the workload. So all these, the learning objectives in our course, and what in the course, if it's an existing one, would we want to improve? What do we want to target? What do we want to aim for with a blended course? If we're blending, of course, we want to make, I mentioned that in the first webinar, get the best of both worlds. We want to improve our course through adding a digital component, for example. So we still want to make it better, of course, for us, for the learners as well, for the general well-being of the course. There's a number of choices we are making when we start out building a blended course. In blended learning, we have a lot of flexibility. Usually in the literature, we'll find, if we're talking about the time, the splitting of time between our two modalities, the synchronous and the asynchronous aspect, there is a lot of liberty. You can see that usually we talk about blended learning if we have between 30 and 79% of online learning in our course. That is a huge difference, right, between 30 and 79. So we can have a larger proportion of face-to-face, we can have a larger proportion of remote learning, and we can have perfect balance as well. So these are choices that we are either free to make ourselves, or as a department, or as a whole institution. Depending on all these factors we discussed earlier, if we want our learners, maybe, okay, our learners are maybe not that certain, not that internet literate, and not that used to learning online, maybe we'll start with a larger proportion in face-to-face and then slowly move over, or not, or stay in this situation. Or we only have fewer teachers. We're limited in staff, but we have a lot of students we need to accommodate. Then maybe a larger proportion of remote learning with more occasional check-ins is also an option for learners. So depending on the realities, we can really adapt the system to our needs as an institution and as a teacher individually as well, or our learners as well. So depending on our teaching realities, we have really a large array of options on really how to split the time between our two modalities. Then there's, of course, also the question of the models of blended learning. I'm only going to talk about two. I'm going to talk about the rotational model and a sequential model. Again, depending on the teaching realities in your institution or in your country, there might be one might be more of an option than another. Typically, I have done blended, or I do blended learning, and in a European university, my learners are first-year students. They're quite used to working online. They're fine. We use the platform, and so we're using a sequential model ourselves. So where I'll be working with them in class, and they work on the platform autonomously online from home for part of the course, which is about 40% of the total time in this case. But that, again, as I said, is entirely free to decide. So this is a sequential model, and then we use it to flip the classroom on occasion and use it in this approach to be a bit more active. That's how we usually work grammar and these kind of elements. This is also because my students all have internet at home. And they all have access to a computer, which might not be the case. We've worked on projects in different countries where this was not the case, where students either didn't have a stable internet connection at home or not necessarily a computer or maybe just a mobile phone. I've lived in South Africa where this was usually a situation that was very common in rural South Africa. So in these cases, a rotational model of station rotations in class would, of course, be also an option to do blended learning, but on campus where you have the necessary tools and the internet connection, hopefully at least. And this works especially well for younger students as well. It's also an option that's used a lot in K-12 teaching. And then learners are simply also for bigger groups. You can split the learners into different groups. And the first group will be working online on the platform or on autonomous activities during part of the class. And after, for example, say 30 minutes, we switch to the next rotation station, for example, where they'll be working up the materials they've seen online. They can work it up with the teacher, use work in communication, for example, dialogues or something, or get teacher feedback, teacher input, additional explanations. And then we could add an extra station where they could work with peers, just in groups, and do like role plays or these kind of elements, or peer learning, peer feedback, and these kind of elements. So we could have, depending on the group, the group size and the course, we could have 2, 3, 4 stations where we can do different things and then switch after a given amount of time, depending on. So this is really a good model to accommodate either in more rural areas where the technology might not be available to everybody, or then if you have very large groups as well, you need to accommodate and you still need to work productively in the language with them. It might be an option to use this class rotation model if your institution allows for it, if you have the kind of necessary equipment as well. So these are choices we're making at the beginning of our course. Okay, how do we split the time, and which kind of model are we going to use in our teaching? Then we know that learning encompasses a lot of factors. We know that learning requires a lot of different presence types. We need cognitive involvement, we need social involvement, we need, of course, teacher present. We need to regulate, support our learners. We need to control the environment. So this is, of course, very important for learning to happen. And here we can't control every aspect. We're in a blended learning course, so we have this remote, online activity where, per definition, where we're not standing next to our learners and seeing how they're learning. But we still need to have this teaching present. We need to show, okay, this is important. The sequencing is important. How we're splitting our activities over our 2 modalities, how we manage our time, how we use the tools, present the tools to our learners is very important, because we're not there. We need clear and useful instructions, because we're not there to give additional explanations. So we need to help them bridge this gap to the technology, which is why I always say that, well, teachers, trainers are really the connecting link between the online part and the classroom learning and the technology as well, the learners. So they're all connecting, they're really central to the situation. They're very, very important also in the helping, well, in the construction of sense, making conclusions, giving feedback. All these are, of course, elements that are absolutely crucial for learning to take place. And then, and this is the good thing where blended learning comes really into play. The social presence is very difficult to create in a purely online learning, because we're creating interaction, collaboration, or giving really like the idea of a safe environment and really interactive learning. This socio-affective element of learning with a platform or with pure online learning is a bit more difficult to create. So again, we have the teacher mediating between us, and then we also have the face-to-face component where we can, of course, compensate for this. So we see that there's a huge amount of factors, obviously, playing a part in learning. And the teachers will really play an important part in connecting all the parts between the two modalities, of learning in the blended learning setting. Which leads us, so we've decided on a repetition of time. We've talked about the model, we've chosen that, and now we need to kind of find the right proportion of time spent online and in the platform, and especially also the session duration. I was mentioning earlier that it could be an option to start maybe slower and go up in the time. It's not always an option. Sometimes we just need something. We need to have, for example, we have 2 hours per week in class, then we add another hour of e-learning, for example, to it. This is absolutely an option. We need something regular. And the learning will adapt, the blended learning system will adapt to your teaching reality. So this is really, you are, as a teacher or an institution, you can really set, depending on the needs, you know, your learners, your institution, the realities of your course. So whatever you are deciding will be working, obviously, because you know better for your situation. We can do adaptive models where we adapt, maybe you have a higher amount of time in class initially and then diminish it and work more and more online as we go along in the course. But again, it's not always an option either. Then we have the session duration. Especially, in class learning, we have our set times, we have our schedule, we know how it works. But for online learning, we do notice that, screen fatigue is a thing. We get more tired more easily online when we're working online. We have a lot of video conferencing, a lot of e-learning, or we work a lot on our laptops where we get exhausted faster. The retention rate is lower as well, statistically. So usually if we are working online and we are giving a set amount of time or a set amount of activities for our students to do, we need to be very realistic in the objectives we're setting, because, we don't want them to overwork, be in cognitive overload, and in the end not remember anything of what they've been doing. So we recommend usually more shorter but more regular sessions. So for example, two sessions of about 30 minutes a week rather than 1 hour block. First of all, it's easier to find a short amount of time in your day, in your week. Students are busy, they have to go to classes, they have their hobbies, they have to have their free time as well. So if they have a shorter amount of time to work, they will find it easier to accommodate in a busy day. And then also simply the retention rate will be higher. It's more motivating, more engaging to just focus for 30 minutes and be done. And then maybe start over a couple of days later. It has a number of advantages in a language learning context as well, in that the students will be exposed to more input, more regular input as well. So again, which is never a bad thing, and for language learning either. Especially for beginners, that's important. Once they've gotten used a bit more to, language learning, the e-learning component, maybe the sessions could be a bit longer, but I would clearly recommend a frequency over length, duration in this case. One important aspect is also sometimes we have doubts whether e-learning could be a good option for beginners. If we have beginners in a foreign language, is this really the thing for them to be left to their own devices? I'm air quoting here, but is it really the best environment for them? And I think in a blended setting for beginners, the e-learning component can be very beneficial, because there's a lot of advantages for them to be able to work at their own pace, to have a lot of repetition if they need it. For example, if in class you're watching a video or listening to any kind of audio, same goes actually for reading as well. We all know, we've all met these situations where some learners are done after 1 or 2 listens, have answered all the questions, they're done, and they get bored. Whereas maybe weaker students or less advanced students might need a 3rd or 4th listen-in to just get used to be able to understand the audio and answer the questions. So they need some more repetition, and they get frustrated because they see that the others are done, so they feel less efficient, they just feel bad about themselves, their language level, whereas the others get bored and are still. And in the end, getting the whole class to focus afterwards back together is a bit more difficult. So we have a lot of frustration on both sides. Whereas if everybody is working individually online in their own part, well, they can get as many repetitions as they need initially when they're a bit lower. And then also, in addition to repetition for beginners, we have a lot of, it could also be advantages for them to work online on, for example, preparation of communicative tasks. They can prepare the vocabulary, they can prepare some phrases, they can look up, they can even, depending on the tools you have, they could practice their pronunciation. For example, on our platform, we have a pronunciation tool where they can practice, they can record themselves pronouncing a word or a phrase. It's not much, it's not very interactive, but at least they know that they're pronouncing this word right, and they can actually use it, mobilize it once they're back in class. Yes, so, and then obviously, so this is for beginners. Advanced levels have, of course, an easier time working online because not everything is new. They understand the instructions, even if it's in the target language. But here we also have to accommodate for this slower, less visible progress, right? Learners can get very frustrated because sometimes they feel that they are stagnating because they can't see the progress. And here, blended learning can also be quite interesting because they can maybe get learning outcomes. They can see that they're progressing on the platform, ticking off lessons, maybe taking a language assessment on occasion and seeing that they're progressing. So this can also help motivate learners as well. So we've set up our course. We know how the length of a session. We know which model we're using. Now we're sequencing and deciding on the content of our learning sessions. Of course, we have all these language skills, sub-skills. We need to accommodate, again, depending on the objective of your course. Maybe you do not need all of them in your relevant courses. But the idea is really to split it here instead of putting up in a curriculum design, putting it up in just a face-to-face and maybe some homework. We actually have two modalities to accommodate the face-to-face and the remote, the distance learning. Where again, so the face-to-face teacher-led peer learning can happen. We have a lot of possibilities for interactions. I'll come to that for now. And then we have the remote learning, which is often on their own self-directed learning. So we need to find a way of really accommodating all the different skills and sub-skills and the knowledge and activities on these two modalities. And here I usually talk a bit about balance. I talk about two pieces of a puzzle, so that our course is the puzzle and the whole picture is only visible once we have both pieces of a puzzle. So that's important so that our face-to-face and our distance activities are really, they go hand in hand, they are connected. There's a link between the two of them, because if they're just coexisting somewhere in parallel, learners will not feel engaged. They will not feel the need. They won't see a sense in this activity, and they will simply neglect the online part, which we hear a lot, right? If we're doing blended learning, it's like, oh, but no, my learners they can never be bothered to do the online part. And that is usually, I mean, some learners are just resistant to that, but usually it's because simply they don't see the point of doing these activities because it's not connected to the face-to-face class. Which is why usually, if we have the choice to do this, we have in our face-to-face class, we have, as I said, the teaching presence, we have the peer learning as well happening. So this is the perfect place to do productive, interactive activities, collaborative activities as well, where they can learn from others, they can learn together. We can get feedback and comment as teachers as well on their performance. Whereas we have the distance learning, the remote learning activities, which are more a place where we can work, for example, receptively, which is also in tune with most online tools, where you can listen, you can read, you can do vocabulary exercises, grammar exercises at your own pace, really. Repeated at need, you get the automatic correction of exercises, so you lose a lot less time in class. Again, air quotes here because it's not wasting, but we can just use it more so that everybody can work at their own pace on receptive activities, and then we can mobilize it in class, use it as a base for activities in class, provided it is connected. Here it's important to find the right balance, really, to really to really show that we're not repeating in class exactly what was seen online, because otherwise learners won't see the point. And again, they will just not do it because it's repeated in class. So we need to just mobilize it, be able to activate it. What I always like to do is, for example, as an icebreaker, just to make sure they do the activity online, do an icebreaker activity. It can be a short quiz on any kind of quiz tool you might have at your disposal, free or through university, either on their phones, because they have their phones anyway, so they can answer on the quiz on their phone. And then you get a scoreboard, for example, at the end. Or you can just do a normal type quiz where you just ask students to answer. Sometimes use balls just to designate the speaker, to just, okay, so we saw this online, so what would be, for example, the answer? We do a short quiz on the content that was seen online just at the beginning of the class. It's a good icebreaker, because then they get into it, they see the point of doing the distance learning activity as well, because we use it in class. Then we use it as a base to build up on the next activities without so much repeating, but really using it as a basis for the next bunch of activities. And then maybe shortly just to round up on the activities and the choice of activities, it's of course important to also show your learners, and that's where we're getting also kind of into the teacher workload, to show your learners that you can follow up on what they're doing online, which is good if we have a platform or a learning management system or an LCMS, but it can be on anything really, or they can also just share it with you to show what they've been doing online, and you can follow up on their activities just to show that you can. It doesn't mean that you have every time, because realistically we can't be following up on every single activity they've been doing, but we can look at least if they've logged into the Moodle, into the LMS, or into the platform over the past week when they were supposed to be working, and then, for example, address it if it becomes an issue with different learners. If we see that some learners are repeatedly not if they're repeatedly not working or have never logged into the system. And this can also become an obstacle for learners, because sometimes they just I don't know, they have this barrier, this mental barrier, and they can't overcome it, and they just need some bit of help, some incentive to just log in and start working on the platform. And ideally, of course, before, like, not 2 weeks before the exam, if they're supposed to be working on there regularly. Then let's talk about resource management briefly, because it's very variable depending on institutions. As I was mentioning earlier, having a digital learning environment is a good option. An LMS, it can be a different elements. That is, of course, an option. Again, not every institution, depending on the countries and the location, might not have access to this. There's also a lot of free or not free sharing and collaborative tools. Again, it's a lot of choices that are made depending on departments. It can be very, very variable. And even if you don't have an LMS, messaging tools like or just your university email or WhatsApp can be an option to just communicate with your learners. What's important is that in a blended setting, like in any setting, learners actually need to be informed about what is expected of them and what we want of them, where we want them to go, what we want them to do. And if they know what they should do at all times, if they get lost, we lose them, and then they won't do for example, the online activities, and we lose them and they kind of drop out of this bit. If they're informed, they have some kind of resource where they know, okay, this week I'm supposed to be working on this, and maybe have a link ready, then it's easy for them to know where to find their way and going there. Again, we have this kind of mental barrier, this mental block that if it becomes too difficult, we would risk at losing them. So accommodating this, knowing this, then we can message with them, we can exchange messages, we can inform them. Trainers and learners must be trained to use the tool. It's very important, because we usually just assume that our learners are digital natives and they know how to use a platform or an LMS or something. But actually, no, not necessarily. And sometimes, as I was mentioning earlier, sometimes they just don't, they're kind of afraid, and then they're pushing it, and in the end it becomes this huge thing in their mind, and they need really help to overcome this obstacle. But the same goes for trainers as well. Teachers, if we're not training them, we're just giving them a tool and not telling them how to use it. Same thing, either they might reject it because they don't like it, because they don't know it, they don't take the time to get to know it, and they really as I was mentioning earlier, in the middle between the teachers, the learners and the technology. So teachers to be trained in using the tools so that they can help their learners, but also help themselves creating the best possible learning environment and teaching environment for themselves. And then third tip I actually mentioned is that the communication and the link between the two parts. Oh, the battery is dying. Why is this not charging? It's the link between the two parts, and this is really paramount amount, which is why trainers, teachers are absolutely central in blended learning still. So this is very important. Would never neglect them. They're absolutely crucial, which is why I want to talk about the workload just briefly as well. As I was mentioning earlier, a reaction we get a lot to trainers being suggested to work on a platform with a platform or working in blended learning, adapting their teaching. Initially, they're not very happy with us because it means that they have to change their ways. They might be slightly set in their ways. They have materials they like using as well. And then it seems like it's a very, very heavy workload also in blended learning. Oh, I have to follow up on my learners all the time. It might appear very heavy at the start, but it gets better and better, and especially if you get more proficient with the tools you have. Usually you have reporting tools or follow-up tools on platforms or on LMSs where you can actually look at a glance what your learners have been up to. You can follow up, you get reports on activities, you can export them into Excel and use it with your assessment sheets as well. The idea, I think, initially is that maybe they're trying to change everything too fast and too much. So one piece of advice we usually give is to not try and reinvent the wheel. So they can use existing content, online content that is already existing, or a learning platform such as maybe Altissia or anything else. As I said, I promised I would remain quite neutral in this, but it really helps to have something that is there already, where you don't have to build a whole Moodle. Everyone who's ever built a course in Moodle knows how tricky it is to build exercises, and I guess it's the same in many other LMSs, to build exercises, to do all these little variables if you're building a material. So if you want to do this properly, it takes forever, whereas if you have existing content, it really helps. And then also another piece of advice is don't stay alone. Well, collaboration between peers is valid not only for learners, for students, but it also beneficial for teachers, for trainers. Collaboration helps manage the workload. You can get inspiration, you can get feedback, you can also get just an opinion on why do you think this didn't work? Why did it just completely go the wrong direction? My students were not responsive to this at all. You get some honest feedback if you have this kind of relationship with your colleagues and just working as a team. It helps to manage the workload, but also the mental load of changing, and you know that you're not alone in the situation. Then in the content and content creation, of course, we want to reconcile somewhere, right? We want to have a good, pedagogically sound course, but we also want to limit having to change everything at once in the preparation time, because, well, teachers are usually quite busy. We're running from one lesson to the next. We have assessments, we have tons of exams to correct in this kind of elements. So there is a lot going on at best of times. And so if we're changing a whole new course, we're building it, it is busy, it takes a lot of time. So, well, some tips, not all of them, of course. Well, use resources that are available online. If you're not using a platform, this might be highly variable depending on the language you teach. If you're as lucky as to teach English, English has all the resources. If you go into any other languages, you'll see that it's depleted from there's a bit less choice from the start, but you still find a lot of resources. I myself teach German as well as a foreign language, and there's a lot happening there as well. So you can find a lot of existing resources online. Reuse your face-to-face course to develop the collaborative dimension, as I was mentioning earlier, with quizzes, with games. Just also do it in a fun way to add some gamification and some informal learning to your course. Involve your learners. For example, in the creation of videos or vocabulary lists, it's something that is very beneficial pedagogically for them to be very active in the creation. And they can, for example, create short videos on their phones. These kind of elements you can then visualize all together. It's good work, it's mobilizing work, and then you can afterwards share it on on the LMS, for example, or in whatever video sharing tool you're using. And then also, last tip, use existing platform if this is an option for you. So however you want to do it, existing platforms have advantages in that there is what was I want to say? I have a blackout. I saw a question pop on the screen and now I lost my train of thought. So yes, the advantage to platforms is that the user experience design is, of course, done professionally. You don't need to fuss yourself over building a whole Moodle course. They have a lot of content available at various levels, at all levels usually. And then you also get various languages, which can be beneficial if you have colleagues teaching different languages as well. So this is, and then you have interface languages to help your learners, for example, as well. If you have heterogeneous classes, you can also have them work on different levels. So this is a lot of advantages for existing platforms as well. So this can also help limit the preparation time without having to say that you need to use a platform, but it can be an asset, of course, in a course. Right. So this is just the beginning, of course, if we want to set out, just to summarize just some of the tips I was giving. If we want to make sure that our blended course works well, the teamwork, as I was saying, with teachers, give the teachers also the trainers the freedom to choose their own resources. Additionally, so depending on what they're using, even if you have, for example, a platform that is there, they can still use the resources they want to use in the face-to-face program or whatever resources they want to use on the platform and how they want to use the platform. This is, of course, very motivating for teachers to see that they still have the choice, this pedagogical liberty to create their own course. Train the learners, but also train the trainers, train the teachers on the tool, on the approach, on their roles and the benefits so that they don't feel sidetracked either. And then, of course, the link between the distance and the face-to-face courses, it needs to be complementary to just avoid learner frustration and demotivation. And if the learners are frustrated, the teacher gets frustrated and the whole course ends up as a disaster. So if we have this clear, visible link between our two modalities in the course and really a complementarity in our course design between our two modalities, as I was mentioning, one idea would be to work more receptively on a platform and more productively in face-to-face. Then usually we can limit these frustrations and hopefully get a successful course and one that's engaging for the learners, but also for the teachers. All right, that's it for me. I saw there's some questions coming up in the chat, so let's tackle that.
Yep. There are several questions for you, Véronique. So let me start with the first one. So would like tips of activity for the blended.
Okay, that is very vague. What kind of activities? So kind of activities that are to help connect the two modalities, or so that's maybe a bit vague. So we can do, of course, a lot of activities, and there's I mean, we'll be talking about in the next webinar also about how to work the different skills in the blended, so the different language skills in which modality. So there will be a lot of tips for that. So maybe we can just invite you to attend the next webinar as well. And then if we're looking for good activities to connect the two modalities, that can be really anything. It really depends on the teacher personality. As I said, my own style is because you also need to feel comfortable with something. I can tell you what worked for me, but maybe others also have tips. So if you have any tips maybe that you've used in your classroom, feel free to put them in the chat as well. I like using a lot of quizzes, have my students move around in class on occasion as well. So it can be, as I was mentioning earlier, the icebreaker quizzes, either on their phones or they can even move around. We can do this kind of activities as well. Or then also group activities where they brainstorm together on something. For example, I give 3-4 words we had in the online content, and then they come up as a group with a little short story and they present it later. It really depends on the topic as well. I like to get my students very involved in class and then work in small groups and do different activities. So it can be very varied.
Could you explain again what you mean by rotational and sequential models?
Of course. Of course. So let me just maybe share my screen again with you and just go back to that slide. Just to visualize it better. So a sequential model will be where we have the two modalities used one after the other. So in class learning, and then the learners go home and can work on their own from home in their own time. For example, they know they have a number of activities to do per week, but they can choose on their own devices when they want to work this. So this is more sequential, one after the other, in this way. And then the class rotational model is usually during a set time in class. If you, for example, have a 2-hour block with your students and you split the group into different stations. So you have one part of the group that will be working on their computers or class computers or whatever, but still in class during the set classroom time. So they're working on their own there. Then you have the next part of the group that is working with you, the teacher, and you're doing, I don't know, exercises or giving some additional information, or you're giving some feedback. And then you could have a third group, for example, third part of the group in another rotation. Still, we're all in the same place. We're all at the same time, but we're not working on the same modality at the same time. So this is, and then after a set amount of time, say 30 minutes, you can then change station, and the students that were working with the teacher can go work on the computers and do the online part, for example. So this, as I was saying, has a number of advantages in different settings. If, for example, your learners might not have a stable internet connection at home or not access to a computer, or simply they're younger, or you know that they need to really learn how to work on their own online, then you can really help them in this kind of rotation model. I hope this helps a bit better.
Good. Another question, how can we bring everything together in class when students are working on different activities on the platform?
That really depends.
Because of different levels.
Okay. So that is, of course, a bit more difficult to connect in this case. To make this visible link, as I was mentioning, that is so important. But you can still come together and have them, for example, work on common elements, or also use a partial flipped classroom where you'll have some learners present what they've done online, and then the others as well. So you work on different levels as well, and then come together in class and then put them together, learn from one another, if at different level in the application, and for example, in productive activities they can do then together and learn from one another, and even if they're not entirely at the same level. So this, of course, is a bit more difficult to manage depending on the difference in level, how extreme the distance is in this case. But then you can adapt as long as you adapt to the various levels on occasion. So you might go slightly more down with the general group just to help the lower level learners, and then go higher up, challenge those learners, but they can then learn from the more advanced learners, whereas the more advanced learners can mobilize their knowledge and their skills by helping the less advanced learners. So these are activities that can work as well. It's not easy to set up initially, but it can work really well.
Okay. And case studies, are there specific examples we can read about for inspiration when building our own blended solution?
There is case studies you can find. Again, there's a lot in the literature depending. There's I can't find the name of the book now. I can look it up for you and come back if you email us. Maybe I can put my email or Giovanni's email also in the chat, so we can come back with that, and I can share some literature lists with that as well. I don't have them handy here right now, and I don't want to waste your time either, but definitely you can email me and then we can look it up together.
I will. So for everyone, I'll put here the emails for myself and Véronique, and you can send us all the questions you can have in the coming days. So here you have my email and the mail of Véronique. The last question I see here in the chat is if Altissia is thinking about adding games to our solutions. Yes, I can answer to that if you don't mind. Yes, we are working on that. I mean, not only on games, but like as we provide, and we think we provide a very good solution, we want to be we have to update our platform, our solution on a daily day, basically. So on a daily basis. And so we are working on different development of the platform, including what's called gamification. So they will come in the coming month. Any other question? If not, I think we all really appreciate your attention and your questions. As I said, in the coming days, Nicola will provide you with the link to the recording of this session. And for any question, don't hesitate to come back to us and we will be happy and pleased to answer you.